Welcome to Suri Cheating Story, where we share true stories of betrayal in love. Our channel brings heartfelt, real-life experiences from those who have endured the pain of infidelity. Whether you're facing challenges in your own relationship or seeking to better understand the complexities of love and trust, Suri Cheating Story is the place for you. Subscribe now to explore the emotional depths in the path to healing with us. I never imagined that 2 days before my wedding, I'd be standing here in my own apartment, holding the invitation to my wedding with a broken heart. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my life went from perfect to a chaotic mess in the blink of an eye. I had everything planned for my big day. The dress was ready, the flowers were ordered, and everything was in place for the dream wedding, or so I thought. 2 days before the wedding, my fiance, Ryan, told me he was going out with his friends to celebrate. No big deal, right? Except when he didn't come home that night, I started to worry. It wasn't like him. He always called, always kept me updated, but not this time. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from one of my friends. It was a photo, but I didn't know that yet. I opened it, and there they were. Ryan, my fiance with one of my best friends, Jessica, at a bar, laughing, smiling, and I could see the look in their eyes. It wasn't just a friendly hangout. They were too close, and that's when the panic hit me. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. I tried to tell myself it wasn't true. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew. I knew what was happening. I called Ryan, my hands shaking. He didn't answer. Not a surprise. I had already started to feel the sting of betrayal, but I couldn't bring myself to face it yet. I rushed to Jessica's apartment, hoping for some kind of explanation. I didn't even want to think about what I might find. When she opened the door, she looked guilty, but she didn't have to say a word. I saw it in her eyes. She knew. I didn't need to hear it. I could see it. My best friend was in bed with my fiance. The air around me felt thick. I couldn't breathe. The reality hit me like a freight train. It was happening. Everything I had planned for, my dream wedding, my life with Ryan, was crumbling in front of my eyes, and I had nothing to hold on to. I turned around and walked out. There was nothing left to say. I drove around the city, the familiar streets now feeling like foreign terrain. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see it? Every step I took felt heavier. Every thought, every breath felt wrong. I couldn't face my family. I couldn't tell them what had happened. The wedding was in 2 days. I couldn't just cancel it. I couldn't go through with it either. I had no idea what to do, what to feel. Everything felt out of control. That's when I saw him. His name was Adam, and he wasn't anyone I knew. He was sitting on a park bench, reading a book, completely unaware of what was happening around him. The rain started to fall, light at first, then harder. People rushed past, umbrellas open, but Adam stayed where he was, absorbed in his book, unaffected by the world around him. I stopped, my mind racing, my heart still in chaos. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was the feeling that something, anything, could help me stop thinking about Ryan and Jessica. I walked up to him, unsure of what to say. He looked up, his eyes soft and inviting. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling. "Can I sit here?" He closed his book and nodded, patting the space next to him. "Sure. What's on your mind?" I sat down, the rain soaking through my jacket. But I didn't care. I needed someone to talk to. I didn't care who it was. I just needed to feel like I wasn't alone in that moment. I told him everything. The betrayal, the wedding, Ryan, Jessica. I told him everything, as though the words would somehow make it easier to breathe again. He listened, never interrupting. His expression was calm, his face open, like he was used to hearing painful stories. Maybe he was. When I was done talking, there was a long silence. I expected him to say something comforting, or maybe tell me I was better off without Ryan. But instead, he said something that surprised me. "You know, sometimes you have to let go of what you thought you wanted to make room for something better." I blinked, processing his words. Something better? How could there be something better than the life I had planned? But as I sat there looking at him, I realized he wasn't just talking about me. He was talking about life itself. Life wasn't going to hand me what I wanted. Maybe it was time I started living for myself instead of living for the idea of what I thought was supposed to happen. I stood up, my heart a little lighter, my head a little clearer. "Thanks," I said quietly. not sure if he understood how much his words had meant. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Adam said with a smile. I didn't know where I was going, but at that moment I felt like I was finally ready to figure it out. I wasn't going back to the life I had planned. I wasn't going to marry Ryan. I didn't know who or what I was going to be, but I knew it had to be better than the life I was running from. I didn't go home that night. The thought of facing my parents, of walking into the apartment I had shared with Ryan for the last 3 years, felt like walking into a nightmare. I could already picture their faces, their disappointment, their concern, but I wasn't ready for any of it. Not yet. I drove aimlessly, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The rain was relentless, pouring down in sheets that blurred the city lights into a haze. I kept driving, not knowing where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. I had to escape. From everything. From Ryan. From the wedding. From the life that was no longer mine. After what felt like hours, I ended up at the beach. It was deserted. The sand soaked, the sound of crashing waves filling the air. I parked the car and sat there for a while, staring out at the dark, churning ocean. The waves were powerful, wild, unforgiving, much like the storm inside me. I had spent so many months, years even, planning a future with Ryan, believing that love would somehow be enough to hold everything together. But now, with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth, I realized how wrong I had been. The world around me felt hollow. Every corner of my life, every memory, every plan for the future was crumbling. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw everything away and never look back. But instead, I just sat there feeling numb. I had no idea who I was anymore. I had no idea what I wanted or what I was supposed to do. And then, in the midst of my despair, I heard a voice. "Are you okay?" I turned to see a man standing just a few feet away, his silhouette outlined against the stormy sky. His presence was unexpected, like a flash of light in the darkness. I blinked, trying to clear the fog in my mind. He was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing a jacket against the cold. He didn't look like he belonged here. Yet there he was, standing in front of me like he'd been placed there for a reason. I didn't know what to say. The words stuck in my throat, caught between anger and sadness. I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself. "I'm fine," I said, my voice hoarse, betraying the storm of emotions churning inside me. "Just lost in my thoughts." He took a step closer, his eyes soft but intense, like he could see through the walls I had built up around myself. "You don't look fine," he said quietly. "What happened?" I shook my head, not sure if I was ready to share everything with a stranger. But something about his presence was comforting, his calmness contagious. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and let it all spill out. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the overwhelming sense of losing everything I had worked for. I didn't care that he was a stranger. At that moment, I just needed someone to listen. He didn't interrupt me, didn't offer any empty words of sympathy. He just stood there, his gaze unwavering, letting me pour out my pain. When I finally finished, I felt drained, empty. I had laid it all bare, and still I felt like I was drowning. But then he spoke again, his voice low and steady. "Sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan," he said. "But that doesn't mean it's over. You're stronger than you think." I laughed bitterly. "Stronger? How can you say that? I've just been betrayed by the one person I trusted most. My whole life is falling apart." He stepped forward, his expression serious now. "You're not falling apart. You're rebuilding. And it's going to hurt, but it's the only way forward. You have to let go of what was to make room for something new, something better." His words hit me like a jolt of electricity. I didn't know why, but I felt something stir within me. Maybe it was the raw honesty in his voice. Maybe it was the realization that I couldn't stay in this place of despair forever. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay stuck in the past. For the first time in what felt like days, I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his eyes that was different from anyone else I had met. There was no judgment, no pity, just understanding. It was like he saw the potential for something more in me, something I couldn't see myself. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled then, a small, reassuring smile that seemed to erase some of the heaviness from my chest. "That's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out right now, but I believe you'll find your way. The rain started to let up, the clouds parting just enough to let a few rays of moonlight break through. It was as if the world was shifting, clearing a path for me, even if I couldn't see it yet. "Who are you?" I asked, genuinely curious now. "Why are you here?" He paused for a moment, looking out at the ocean before turning back to me with a quiet confidence. "Maybe I'm just someone who's been where you are. And maybe, just maybe, I'm here to remind you that you're not alone." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to ask more questions, wanted to know how he knew what to say, but another part of me just wanted to thank him for being there when I needed someone, for making me feel like I wasn't invisible. "I don't even know your name," I said with a half laugh. "Ben," he replied simply. "But you don't need to know my name. Just remember that there's always a way out, even when it feels like everything is falling apart." I nodded, taking in his words. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could start moving forward. It wouldn't be easy, I knew that, but I also knew that I didn't have to face it alone. As Ben turned to leave, he paused and looked back at me. "You'll be okay," he said with a final knowing smile. "Just don't give up on yourself." And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the night. But his words stayed with me, echoing in my mind like a quiet promise. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind raced between anger, disbelief, and something else, something new though it felt foreign to me. Hope. It was strange, almost laughable. Hope seemed like a luxury I hadn't had the privilege of experiencing in a long time. But Ben's words, his quiet conviction, stuck with me. "You're not falling apart. You're rebuilding." Rebuilding. The thought lingered in my mind like an anchor, something I could hold on to when everything around me felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I wasn't going to let Ryan's betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let this pain control my life. It was hard, though. So hard. I couldn't bear to look at the wedding dress hanging in my closet. Every time I saw it, it felt like a reminder of the future I had dreamed of, now shattered. So, I packed it up and shoved it in the back of the closet, out of sight, out of mind. The wedding invitations, every little thing that had been part of the dream I thought I was living, felt like a lie now. I decided to take a week off work. I couldn't focus on anything, not when my heart was so raw. Instead, I spent those days walking through the city, letting the noise and chaos drown out my thoughts. I visited the places Ryan and I used to go, our favorite coffee shop, the park where we had our first kiss, the spot by the river where we talked about our future. It hurt to see them, but it also helped me realize something. Those places weren't the source of my happiness. I had been all along. I had built those memories with him, but they weren't what defined me. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a small art gallery on the corner of the street. It was a place I had always wanted to visit but had never gotten around to. Today felt different. I needed to do something that was mine, something just for me. I stepped inside. The gallery was quiet, the walls lined with abstract paintings and black and white photographs. It smelled like fresh paint and possibility. I wandered through the rooms, my fingers lightly grazing the frames, feeling the texture of the images. Each painting told a story. Each photograph captured a moment frozen in time. I stood in front of one piece, a chaotic swirl of colors and shapes, and felt something stir inside me. It was messy, raw, just like how I felt. But there was beauty in the mess. I stayed for hours, lost in the art, lost in my thoughts. By the time I left, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over everything. I felt lighter, like something inside me had shifted. Maybe Ben was right. Maybe I wasn't falling apart. Maybe I was just learning how to piece myself back together. The next few weeks passed in a haze of self-discovery. I started doing things that made me happy, that filled me with purpose. I took up painting again, something I had loved as a child, but had pushed aside in favor of more practical pursuits. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. I went to therapy, something I had never considered before, but had heard could help. It didn't fix everything, but it gave me space to talk about my feelings without judgment. One night, as I was sitting at my kitchen table, sketching out a new painting, I felt something inside me click. I wasn't just moving through the motions anymore. I was actually living again. For the first time in a long time, I could feel a sense of peace settling within me. I wasn't waiting for someone else to fix me, to make me whole. I was doing it on my own, and it felt good. But there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the past. A part of me that kept wondering if I would ever be able to forgive Ryan for what he had done. If I could ever trust again. Then one evening, my phone buzzed, a message from Ryan. My heart skipped a beat, a wave of unease washing over me. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening the message. "I'm sorry, Sarah," it began. "I never meant to hurt you. I was selfish, and I betrayed your trust in the worst way. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm hoping you'll at least hear me out. If you ever feel ready to talk, I'll be here. I'll always regret what I did, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it." I read the message over and over, each word sinking deeper into my chest. It wasn't the apology I had wanted, but it was the one I needed. It didn't make what he did okay, and it didn't change the fact that I was no longer the person I had been when I was with him. But it gave me something. Closure. And that's when I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about letting go of the anger that had consumed me for so long. It was about freeing myself from the past. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready, but eventually I did. "I don't hate you, Ryan, but I can't be with you anymore. I'm not the same person I was, and I've learned to love myself in ways I never did before. I'm moving on. I hope you can too." It was short, simple, but it was enough. I let go of the last of the pain, the last of the what-ifs. I had already started to rebuild my life, and now I was ready to move forward without looking back. Months passed, and each day felt like a small step toward the person I had always wanted to be, but had never truly known. I spent my time painting, writing, and rediscovering things I had forgotten about myself. The dreams I had buried under the weight of my past, the joy I had put aside in favor of someone else's happiness. The sadness from that broken chapter in my life never fully disappeared, but it became something I could live with, something I could learn from. The world seemed more open to me now. I began to embrace the uncertainty, realizing that life wasn't supposed to be predictable. It wasn't about sticking to a script or following a roadmap someone else had laid out for me. It was about forging my own path, however messy, however unpredictable. And I was okay with that. One day out of the blue, I received an email. It was from Ben, the stranger I met that night by the beach. The subject line simply read, "How are you doing?" I smiled to myself before opening it. "I've been thinking about you lately," the email began, not in a way that's intrusive, but I know how it feels to be stuck in the aftermath of something painful. If you ever feel like catching up or just talking, I'd love to hear how you're doing. No pressure, of course. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Ben had been kind, and his words had meant something, but I hadn't really expected to hear from him again. It felt strange, almost too soon, but I had to admit I was curious. Curious about how he was. Curious about his perspective. And maybe, just maybe, curious about how I was growing without the baggage of the past weighing me down. I wrote back. The email was simple, honest. I told him about my journey, about the changes I was making in my life, and how I was finally starting to feel like myself again. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. A few days later, Ben responded, "I'm glad to hear that you're finding your way, Sarah. You deserve that peace. And if you ever feel like grabbing coffee or just talking about anything and everything, let me know. I'd love to see how things are going." We made plans to meet up the following weekend. I didn't have any grand expectations, but when the day arrived and I saw Ben waiting for me outside the cafe, something unexpected happened. I felt nervous, not because I was afraid of the past, but because, for the first time in months, I felt the stirrings of something new, something hopeful. We talked for hours that day about everything and nothing, about life, love, and all the mess in between. And somewhere in that conversation, in that slow, steady unraveling of two people getting to know each other, I realized that there was more to life than I had given myself credit for. That, yes, there was heartache, but there was also possibility. And Ben, he wasn't someone who would fix me or make me feel like I needed to be saved. He was just someone who understood what it meant to be human, someone who didn't want to add to my pain, but rather would walk with me through whatever came next. I was no longer the person who had been standing in front of that art gallery, lost in despair. I wasn't the same woman who had driven aimlessly through the streets, wondering if there was any way out. I was stronger now, more myself. And as we parted ways that evening, Ben smiled at me, that same warmth in his eyes. "It's good to see you smile again," he said, and I realized how true that was. For the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. Weeks turned into months, and what started as a simple coffee turned into something more, something real. Ben never pressured me, never expected anything but the truth. And as time passed, I found myself looking forward to the little moments, those shared glances, the quiet conversations, the slow-building trust that, like the brushstrokes on my canvas, created a picture I hadn't seen coming. One evening, sitting on the couch in my apartment, Ben took my hand and looked at me with a sincerity that stole my breath. "I'm glad we found each other," he said quietly. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "Me too." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the fairy tale I thought I had been promised, but it was real. It was mine. It was a love I had built, not out of expectations or dreams that weren't my own, but out of understanding, patience, and a deep respect for each other's scars. As I stood by the window later that night, looking out at the city lights, I felt at peace. The future didn't seem so terrifying anymore. The past still hurt, but it no longer had control over me. I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was someone new, someone who had learned to stand on her own and to open her heart to the possibility of something better. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that this new beginning was just the start of a journey I was finally ready to take. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.